Under the silver domes of the Alien Academy, the atmosphere was alive with noise and movement. Students from across the galaxy filled the massive hall, their colors, shapes, and sizes making the place look like a living rainbow. Some were tall and scaled, others short and furred, and some shimmered like liquid light. They had all come for today's lecture, one they expected would be filled with laughter and amusement. The glowing holoscreen at the front displayed words in dozens of languages, but the message was the same everywhere: Earth and its primitive creatures. A hush fell across the room as the professor, a tall, four-armed scholar with a metallic sheen to his skin, tapped the controls. The holoscreen flickered, and suddenly, there it was. A spider. Tiny, fragile, a creature with thin legs and dark body. On the massive screen, it looked enlarged, but everyone knew its true size. Barely the length of a claw, small enough to crush beneath a single finger. For a second, silence lingered, and then the laughter began. It rolled through the rows like a storm. Alien students slapped their seats, tails thumped, mandibles clacked in amusement. "That is it," one scoffed. "This is what Earth calls life." Another shouted across the chamber, "Our children would laugh at this insect." The sound rose higher, echoing until the great dome seemed to shake with it. In the far corner, among the shadows, the human ambassador watched. His black uniform was plain compared to the radiant robes and glittering armor of the others. He stood without moving, his eyes fixed on the image of the spider. Where others laughed, he smiled faintly, lips curving with something closer to patience than amusement. The professor raised his voice, trying to bring order. Yes, I see your reaction. You find it amusing. But to humans, these creatures are common. They are sometimes feared, sometimes even kept as pets." His voice was scholarly, detached. "They build webs, they crawl on walls, they bite. But compared to your species' great beasts and war animals, they appear small and harmless." The laughter only grew louder. Some students leaned forward, pressing their claws or hands against their seats as though unable to contain their joy. "Harmless," one shouted. "Even I could destroy 1,000 of them in a blink." A young alien warrior rose from his seat, his armor gleaming. He was broad-shouldered, his forearms flexing with confidence. He sneered at the image. "Professor, forgive me, but why are we wasting time? This thing is no creature of note. Even our smallest children could crush this insect without effort. If this is the strength of Earth, then humans are weaker than we thought." The crowd erupted again, the alien warrior's words feeding their arrogance. Some shouted for the professor to show something more worthy, others demanded the lecture end. In the corner, the human finally stepped forward. His boots echoed faintly on the polished floor as he entered the light. The crowd turned, some whispering, some smirking. He was the only human in the hall, a guest and observer. When the noise died, his voice carried calmly, each word deliberate. "You laugh. You mock. But would you wager your strongest warrior against one Earth spider?" For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then the hall exploded again, this time with disbelief. "A joke," someone shouted. "An insect against a warrior. Madness." The warrior who had spoken earlier slammed his fist against his chest. "I accept. Let me crush this thing before all." His eyes glowed with pride, and the others cheered him on. The professor hesitated, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Ambassador, such a demonstration." The human raised his hand, cutting him off. His eyes never left the warrior. "Then let it be so. Bring your strongest. And I will bring one spider." Word spread through the academy like fire. By the next rotation, the great hall had been transformed into an arena. A protective barrier shimmered around the ring, designed for duels and contests of strength. Students crowded the seats, their voices rumbling like thunder. The alien warrior entered first, towering and confident, his armor polished to a mirror shine. He flexed his arms, showing his strength to the cheering crowd. Opposite him, a simple glass container was placed on the floor. Inside, motionless and unassuming, the Earth spider waited. It was small, almost invisible against the polished surface. The audience erupted again, laughter spilling through the arena. This is the challenge. This is what humans bring. The ambassador stood at the edge, calm as ever. He tapped the side of the container, and the lid slid open. Slowly, the spider crawled out, its delicate legs moving with quiet grace. The warrior threw back his head and laughed, raising his arm high. "Watch and learn, all of you. I will crush this thing as easily as dust beneath my step." He lowered one massive hand, fingers spread wide, ready to close around the tiny creature. But the spider moved. It was fast, faster than anyone had expected. It darted across the polished floor, leaping onto the warrior's hand. At first, the alien only laughed harder, lifting his arm to show the audience. "See? It clings to me, like a toy." Then, the laughter stopped. The warrior's grin faltered. His eyes widened. His other hands twitched, as if unsure. A moment later, his body stiffened. The spider had sunk its fangs into his skin, a bite so small most couldn't even see it. But inside his veins, the venom spread like fire. He staggered backward, his laughter turning into a strained gasp. His knees buckled. The crowd, once roaring with joy, now sat frozen in silence. "What is happening?" one student whispered. "It bit him. That's all." The professor leaned forward, his voice trembling. "Venom. Earth spiders carry toxins. To humans, a sting, perhaps pain. But to alien biology," he trailed off as the warrior collapsed onto one knee, his body trembling. His face twisted in agony as the venom tore through him. Gasps filled the hall. Some students jumped to their feet. Others leaned away as if afraid the spider might leap onto them next. The tiny creature, still perched on the warrior's hand, looked insignificant, but the strongest warrior of their academy was falling, powerless before it. The ambassador finally stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp. "You see weakness. You see something small. But nature does not measure strength in size." His gaze swept across the silent hall. "You laugh at what you do not understand. And in doing so, you reveal your ignorance." The warrior collapsed fully to the ground, still alive but shaking, his pride shattered. The spider crawled off his hand, returning to the floor as if nothing had happened. The audience sat frozen in disbelief. The laughter was gone. In its place was fear, fear of the tiny creature, fear of the world it came from, and fear of the humans who understood it. The ambassador turned back toward the shadows, his faint smile returning. "This was only one spider," he said softly. "Do you still wish to see the rest?" The silence that followed was heavy, unbroken. None dared to answer. And in that silence, the legend of Earth began to spread, seeded not by war or weapons, but by the smallest of its creatures. The night after the broadcast, the entire galaxy buzzed with questions. Why had the human delegate smiled? Every news channel replayed the moment in slow motion, zooming in on the curve of his lips, the steady calm in his eyes. Some commentators claimed it was arrogance. Others whispered it was a warning. A few even dared to suggest it was part of a larger plan. But no one truly knew. Behind closed doors, however, Earth was far from silent. Inside hidden bunkers and underground chambers, leaders of nations gathered. The human delegate's smile had not been an accident. It was a signal. The world had expected fury when the Council voted to banish Earth from all galactic trade and alliances. Instead, humanity had prepared for this moment. For decades, humans had been underestimated. The other races looked at Earth and saw a fragile species, still young, still reckless. They ignored the scars of countless wars, the history of survival against impossible odds, the stubborn refusal to ever bow. Now, humanity had exactly what it wanted: freedom from alien control. Military ships that had been hidden in asteroid belts powered up their engines. Laboratories that had been quiet for years opened their doors. Scientists who had worked in secrecy revealed technologies never shared with the Council. But while Earth planned in silence, the alien empires argued loudly. Some demanded that humans be punished further, stripped of even the right to travel among the stars. Others warned that such action would provoke disaster. And in those heated debates, the smile of the human delegate became a ghost that haunted them all. What did the humans know? What were they hiding? And why, in the face of exile, did they look so calm? Even as the Council debated, human ships slipped into the void, moving without announcing their destinations. Observers tried to follow, but tracking systems failed. It was as if humanity had simply vanished into the darkness of space. The truth was darker than anyone imagined. Earth was not retreating. Earth was preparing. The night after the broadcast, the entire galaxy buzzed with questions. Why had the human delegate smiled? Every news channel replayed the moment in slow motion, zooming in on the curve of his lips, the steady calm in his eyes. Some commentators claimed it was arrogance. Others whispered it was a warning. A few even dared to suggest it was part of a larger plan. But no one truly knew. Behind closed doors, however, Earth was far from silent. Inside hidden bunkers and underground chambers, leaders of nations gathered. The human delegate's smile had not been an accident. It was a signal. The world had expected fury when the Council voted to banish Earth from all galactic trade and alliances. Instead, humanity had prepared for this moment. For decades, humans had been underestimated. The other races looked at Earth and saw a fragile species, still young, still reckless. They ignored the scars of countless wars, the history of survival against impossible odds, the stubborn refusal to ever bow. Now, humanity had exactly what it wanted: freedom from alien control. Military ships that had been hidden in asteroid belts powered up their engines. Laboratories that had been quiet for years opened their doors. Scientists who had worked in secrecy revealed technologies never shared with the Council. But while Earth planned in silence, the alien empires argued loudly. Some demanded that humans be punished further, stripped of even the right to travel among the stars. Others warned that such action would provoke disaster. And in those heated debates, the smile of the human delegate became a ghost that haunted them all. What did the humans know? What were they hiding? And why, in the face of exile, did they look so calm? Even as the Council debated, human ships slipped into the void, moving without announcing their destinations. Observers tried to follow, but tracking systems failed. It was as if humanity had simply vanished into the darkness of space. The truth was darker than anyone imagined. Earth was not retreating. Earth was preparing. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy's attention remained fixed on Earth. Spy drones from half a dozen empires circled the solar system, watching for any unusual movement. At first, they reported nothing, just quiet cities, dark skies, and the usual activity of a young world still learning the ways of the stars. But then the silence itself began to feel wrong. No broadcasts came from Earth. No trade ships left its orbit. Even the usual chatter of civilian frequencies went dead. The planet seemed to shut itself off, a fortress with invisible walls. Inside the hidden bunkers, the truth was revealed to only a few. Humanity had decided long ago that this day would come. The Council's banishment was not a curse, it was the final excuse they needed to vanish from alien oversight. Now, the nations of Earth, once divided, moved as one. Old enemies sat at the same table, signing secret agreements. Weapons once thought too dangerous to exist were unsealed. In one underground chamber, a general ran his hand across a massive holographic map. It showed the galaxy not as it was taught in council schools, but as humans had redrawn it in silence. Unknown routes through black holes. Wormholes hidden behind radiation clouds. Dead systems that were not so dead after all. Do they know? One young officer asked. The general shook his head. Not yet. They still think they own the stars. But soon, they'll learn we've been playing a different game. Far away, in the council chambers, unease grew. Reports trickled in from border colonies. Alien merchants swore they had seen human ships traveling on impossible routes, appearing where no jump gate existed. Patrols sent to investigate found nothing, only empty space. Whispers spread. Some claimed humans had discovered a technology beyond council control. Others argued it was a bluff, an illusion to frighten them. But then came the first undeniable proof. A HFY War convoy entered a neutral sector and vanished. No wreckage, no distress calls, no trace. Days later, the HFY homeworld received a transmission. It was only 3 words, spoken in perfect, calm standard. We are watching. The voice was human. Panic spread through the empires. If humans had attacked, why leave no evidence? If they hadn't, who else could it be? And always, at the back of every council member's mind, was that same memory, the human delegate's smile as Earth was banished. The silence from Earth was no longer simple exile. It was strategy. And every passing day made the galaxy wonder the same question. What was humanity preparing to unleash? The first reveal came without warning. In the Outer Rim, a fleet of Trask hunters pursued a smuggler ship that had dared to cross their territory. The chase was routine, until the smuggler's ship suddenly disappeared into a fold of space. The Trask followed, confident their weapons would finish the job. But what they found was not prey. A single human warship hovered in the void. It was unlike anything the Trask had ever seen. Its black surface swallowed light, as if space itself bent around it. The hunters laughed at the size. It was small, almost fragile compared to their massive cruisers. Yet the moment they locked weapons, everything changed. Their targeting systems failed. Engines sputtered. Weapons refused to fire. The Trask ships floated helplessly, as though invisible hands had crushed their machines. Then, on every screen, a simple image appeared, a spider, spinning its web slowly, patiently. Beneath it were the words. The smallest threads bind the strongest prey. The hunters tried to call for help, but their signals never left the system. One by one, their cruisers drifted into silence, their power drained, their crews left in terrified awe. When the lone human ship finally departed, the Trask fleet remained, but it was dead, a graveyard floating in the stars. News spread like wildfire. Aliens whispered about the ghost ship that silenced fleets without firing a shot. Some claimed it was a myth, others swore entire patrols had vanished. The Council demanded answers, but their own spies returned empty-handed. Inside Earth's hidden chambers, leaders listened to intercepted transmissions with grim satisfaction. They are afraid, one said. Good. Let fear do half the work for us. The human ambassador, still seated quietly in the Council's grand hall, received a secret message. He opened it under the table, eyes scanning the words. A thin smile curved across his face. The time for shadows was ending. The galaxy had mocked Earth's spider as weak, laughable. Now, the spider was moving its web. And every empire was already caught in its threads. The next day, the arena was cleaned and prepared for yet another demonstration. Word had spread beyond the academy. Soldiers, scholars, and even diplomats from neighboring systems arrived. They had heard of the tiny Earth creature that could turn a proud warrior into a trembling fool, and they wanted to see if the stories were true. The human ambassador stood quietly at the edge of the stage, his hands folded behind his back. He did not boast, he did not smile this time, he only watched as more warriors lined up to prove themselves. The first was a scaled fighter from the Velth race, known for their iron skin and brute strength. He had crushed many beasts in the wild, beasts far larger than himself. To him, a spider was nothing. He raised his hand, the spider crawled near, and his hand froze in midair. His claws trembled. His chest heaved. He stumbled backward with a growl of confusion. The crowd gasped. Next came a towering insectoid from the Karesh swarm, a species with no fear of crawling things. But when the spider moved toward him with delicate steps, his compound eyes widened, and he shrieked in panic, retreating so fast that he knocked over two of his companions. The audience roared with disbelief. By the third and fourth attempt, the great hall was no longer mocking. Fear had turned into silence, silence into curiosity, and curiosity into something heavier, respect. The spider was returned to its container after each test, unharmed, calm, unbothered. Yet those who faced it carried the look of shame on their faces. Finally, the alien professor stood up. His pride had taken enough damage. His lecture had become a mockery. He pointed at the ambassador and shouted, "This is trickery. You are using hidden technology, some weapon of the mind. No primitive insect can cause this much fear." The ambassador raised a brow. "Do you think I control your warriors' hearts? Their instincts? Their weakness? I merely showed you a mirror." The professor, red with anger, demanded to face the spider himself. The ambassador granted his wish. The tiny creature was placed before him. At first, the professor puffed his chest, steadying his breathing, forcing his body not to react. He reached out with trembling fingers. For a moment, he seemed to have control. But then the spider moved, just one sudden, unpredictable motion, and the professor fell backward onto the floor, his eyes wide, his dignity shattered. The hall erupted in whispers. The ambassador bent down and gently picked up the spider, placing it back in its small container. He spoke calmly, but his voice carried through the hall like thunder. You laugh at what you do not understand. You mock what appears weak. Yet even the smallest creature on earth can bring the strongest among you to your knees. If a spider can break you, imagine what humanity itself can do. The silence that followed was heavy, like a storm hanging over the academy. No one dared laugh anymore. Instead, eyes filled with unease turned toward the human. And in that moment, the aliens began to realize they had underestimated not just a spider, but the entire species that called it part of their world. Would you like me to continue Part 7 with the political consequences of this demonstration spreading across the galaxy? The Academy's Great Hall emptied slowly after the demonstration, but whispers carried across the corridors and into the city beyond. By the next sunrise, the story had already spread to distant systems. News channels replayed the moment the mighty professor fell before the spider, and debates erupted across alien networks. Some called it humiliation, others called it revelation. In council chambers of distant worlds, leaders demanded answers. How can humans control such fear? They asked. What power hides behind this? For many, the idea that a fragile-looking species could wield such influence was deeply unsettling. Back at the academy, the alien students walked differently around the human ambassador. They no longer laughed. They no longer mocked. Instead, they studied him with caution, as if every word he spoke carried hidden weight. Even the bold warrior who had first volunteered would not meet his eyes. But not everyone was silent. A group of alien generals convened in secret. They whispered of danger. If they can bend fear itself into a weapon, humanity cannot be trusted. Today it was a spider. Tomorrow, who knows what monsters they will unleash. The ambassador knew of these whispers, but he did not interfere. He simply walked through the academy halls with quiet confidence, always carrying the small container at his side. Students gave him space, professors grew wary, and even the guards avoided his gaze. Yet among the younger aliens, something new began to grow, not fear, but curiosity. They wanted to understand how humans lived with such creatures, how they turned weakness into strength. Some even approached the ambassador in private, asking questions. Do all humans face spiders without fear? How do your children react? Is fear taught or overcome? The ambassador would answer with patience. Fear is natural, he said. But humans learn to face it, not run from it. That is what makes us dangerous. Not strength, not weapons, but the ability to stare fear in the eye and keep moving forward. In the capital of the Galactic Council, the matter was raised formally. Delegates from many worlds stood up and accused Earth of hiding dark secrets. But others defended humanity, arguing that the demonstration was not a trick, but a lesson. One elder counselor spoke, perhaps we should stop underestimating humans. If they can endure what terrifies the rest of us, then maybe they are not the primitive race we believed. The ambassador remained silent as these debates raged. He did not plead, he did not beg for recognition. He knew the seed had already been planted. The galaxy would never again see Earth the same way. Would you like me to take Part 8 toward a galaxy-wide shift, where humanity uses this moment to redefine its place among the stars? Or do you prefer the ending to stay focused on the ambassador's quiet victory at the academy? Days turned into weeks, and the echo of that moment with the spider reached every corner of the galaxy. What had started as laughter inside a classroom became a storm that no one could stop. In markets on distant moons, merchants whispered about the human trick. In military academies, cadets studied the recording of the spider's victory, pausing each frame, searching for hidden technology that wasn't there. In council chambers, the word human no longer sounded like weakness, it carried a weight, a warning. The ambassador never spoke of it again. He walked through the academy as if nothing had changed, teaching small lessons, answering questions when asked. Yet everywhere he went, silence followed. No one dared mock him. No one dared mock Earth. One night, as stars burned bright beyond the academy's domes, the ambassador stood alone in the observation hall. From his side pouch, he released the spider onto the glass. The tiny creature crawled slowly, its shadow stretching across the starlight. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was the same warrior who had once mocked Earth. His eyes no longer burned with arrogance, but with respect. Ambassador, the warrior said quietly, our people feared nothing before. Now, after this, We understand fear. But we also understand courage. You humans, you carry both inside you. The ambassador turned, his face unreadable. That is why you should never mistake us for weak, he replied. Word of that exchange spread just as quickly as the first event, sealing the lesson deeper into alien memory. For the first time, entire worlds considered Earth not as a backwater planet of primitives, but as a world of survivors. Humanity's greatest weapon had been revealed, not their ships, not their armies, but their ability to master fear itself. And in the silence of the galactic night, the spider kept crawling across the glass, small and fragile, yet powerful enough to change the galaxy forever.